And so I totally believe that.
It makes sort of sense to me because all these ancient civilizations have been telling us about all this for millennia, and we're just now rediscovering what we already knew. You know, and our ancestors. And I think the thing we refer to as the veil is us forgetting or denying that information. And now we're rediscovering it. Just like, how many lost civilizations have we uncovered under the last 5 years? Like a dozen at least. And I think it's because our frequency is raised and we are starting to tap into the frequency of the existence of things that veil, you want to call it, that degree of separation set us aside from. We are awakening and expanding, and that's why all this new information is coming to us in all these ways.
Right. Totally. I believe that. Yeah. Very cool. I don't want this part to be recorded. Can we not record this part, Brian? But I had a lot of trouble.
You want me to?
He told me that there's this guy, Tom Welsh. When they went to investigate the photos in Switzerland, Tom Welsh actually made models to do as comparison photos to Billy's photos. So anyway, what happened was eventually Tom Welsh, after they did all their photo comparisons and all that, Tom Welsh gave the models to Billy's kids, like Methuselah and Atlanta and all that. And so anyway, what eventually happens later is that not only did Tom Welsh's photos get actually mixed in with some of the Meyer photos, but because his kids had Tom Welsh's UFO models made to scale, etc., that when UFO skeptics eventually came along later, they found the models with his kids. And so anyway, that was between Tom Welsh, Lee and Brett Elders, and Wendell Stevens himself when they actually went there in the late 70s, I think it's 78. And they actually did that, and they produced the very first Billy Meyer movie. Yeah.
I mean,
Just kind of giving you another perspective that Michael Horn actually didn't talk about. And I have my own reasons for believing Billy Meyer, not because of what Michael Horn says, but just based on my own findings, and also based on collaborating evidence from other people I've known, such as UFO contactee Dorothy Izad. And because Meyer and Dorothy both talked about the benefactor ETs that actually live right here on the Earth. Oh, hello?
Yes.
Yeah. I want to comment on something. It's Susan.
Yeah, Susan, do you want to turn on your camera?
Yeah, go ahead.
Nah, my
On
hair.
the bottom left where it says stop video.
Oh, I want to decrease the ratings. I really enjoyed Michael, and I've read up a lot on Billy for many, many years. And I always look for, no matter what you listen to, there's probably some truth in no matter what you hear. But what I wanted to say was that there have been enough people who've gone over to Switzerland and were with Billy where they did see things where I believe there's truth in it. I really do. I just wanted to say that. The other thing, I wanted to ask him a question, and I'm going to send him a note that if, say, Billy was prophetic and he predicted a lot of this stuff, it scares me. I have a kid who lives in San Francisco. And I'm curious if Billy talks about altering futures, because I was listening to some other people that, I don't know if anybody listens to the super soldiers and how they talk about, the what's it, MK Ultra, right? That, how they worked on many timelines at the same time. And I was going to ask him about, are there different timelines that tell different things, different outcomes?
Yes. Yeah, I can answer that if you want. Okay, there you are. So from what I've read from Billy's contact notes recently, they mentioned that apparently as far as future events goes in that, like there's a, like we're in a particular timeline, but they mentioned that you can't really change the past of the timeline we're presently in, because if you were to go into the past and actually change something, you'll actually create another timeline. But they also mentioned that for every
What we were
event,
talking about,
What's that?
for every event that you
Online.
change in the past or
like
a
variants.
probable
right?
future, you can actually get, the Pleiarns supposedly discovered up to 7 individual timelines for every choice they make. And so according to Billy Meyer's prophecies and predictions, they say a prediction is events that must happen based on choices that we've already made in a particular timeline. So that's when a prophecy becomes a prediction. So a prophecy is events that could potentially happen in 7 different outcomes. And if we make the right choice, we'll have the best outcome. If we make worst choice, we'll have the worst outcome of the 7 probable, if that answers your question.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I would mention that
Uh,
I never heard about Billy Meyer before, so that was my first time. What I noticed is that he was in Switzerland at that time, and in France at the same period we had such things too, exactly same period. So that's interesting. Second thing, he was not the only one to predict the COVID, not with the word, but you had other people from the planet Humo who said exactly same since the 60s. And I was in touch with that a lot. We were even preparing for that. They gave us a number of advices, practical stuff, saying that we would have a bad economic problem issue from 2020 and most of all 2021, which is exactly what occurs now. So he was not the only one, that is sure. We were working on that stuff since many years in groups, working with the UMO teachings and prophecies and so on. So secondly, I am very surprised about what was said about the COVID because it's not true physically, practically. So, okay, it's a big problem, a big issue for the world, but it's not at all a dangerous virus, not at all that. So that's a prophecy which is not true. I say that medically. So we have lots of groups working on that stuff around the world right now. And we have weekly reports and we know exactly how things are. It's not exactly that. It's what they want us to believe, and they want to frighten us and they want us to die. That is sure, and not to be treated, but this is not true. So we're working against that. The fake news are not on the right side, it's on the other side. So if it is a prophecy, it was not a good one. Though which is true is that it's a big problem that we have to face, and to face it consciously and not with fear. That is sure. Something else, I am very surprised about what he said, that he was the only one. Of course, there are so many contactees all over the world. And the problem is to make a difference between a belief system and between an experience. So that's totally different. And that's the only thing I could really contest in what Michael said, because everything which was not in his belief system was not true. And that's different. When
Well,
you see.
It's interesting because if it was in fact prophetic, it could have also been in lieu of the dark or whatever to create the fear. It was like a pre-plan, like they're pretending to be the part of love, but that's the actual disinformation. To me, that's religion and politics as a whole. It's all disinformation to distract us. If we would just turn in and be present, we would know so much more about reality and fact and truth than if we would stop listening to all the BS on the airwaves.
Yes, I agree.
One thing that I thought was interesting in the prophecy was that it would mutate and it would change and get worse. And that to me is a key point, because if it is a manufactured thing, then it could get more lethal that way. But if it's just a virus that takes on strength, say, and then it mutates, then we're in trouble with that too. So I didn't really believe that it was very dangerous when this all started, but because it's mutating or being made to mutate, now I'm
Yeah.
taking it way more seriously as a threat.
It's mute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, everybody I know already knows that I am barely tethered to this world. I am so connected and tapped into, I can't help but focus on it. I don't care who I leave behind, even if it's family. I know there's more to life than this little tiny reality, and my life is to create a person who is open and does not argue for limitations, but creates an openness within the self and society to understand the fact that we exist at all is just incredible. So how can you say nothing else exists? How can anyone ever say something is impossible? It's all possible.
I think you're right. It's all possible. Absolutely. You know, every thought becomes possible. Every thought becomes a thing.
And it's terrifying because
Yes.
that opens the door to the fact that, you know, we have collectively created some weird shit. But part of our
It's
awakening
fascinating
is,
because- It's
Huh?
fascinating because we know that if we care a bit more about our thoughts, it could change the lots of things. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, thoughts are things. And I've been doing this dream purging work at night for the last few months, where you can call it clearing karma or whatever, clearing, you know, fears of lack or distrust, like all the weird, dumb, limited stuff that I've endured in my life. I achieve REM sleep about 15 times a night. I chug a gallon of water throughout the night. I have to relieve myself about a dozen times a night. I mean, it's been ridiculous, and I'm starting to get exhausted. But what I had said earlier about our dream state being a macrocosm to this waking life, therefore this waking life could be the macro or microcosm of the next life that we waken up into. And right now, if you are open to the fact that we chose our parents and chose our diseases and chose our looks and all that prior to incarnating here, well, this very waking existence can be that moment where we are choosing what we belong to, what our beliefs are, what we look like, how our health is, et cetera, for the awakening into the evolutionary state of our next conscious state. And so thoughts are things, and to focus the reality that you want and leave behind the fear-based crap that you don't want.
sure.
That's a really, really great way to look at it. I especially like the thing about, you know, you're making the decisions for the next life, because I think we do that. Maybe we're there, like you're right. Maybe, you know, a part of us is doing that, and we're creating the next life, because I've always felt like, you know, like I predicted some things about myself, you know, as I remember things. Almost like, oh, I remember that. I remember that I planned that. You know, that's why I'm doing that. And you understand yourself. You kind of grok yourself all of a sudden, right? You realize that you plan the life you're living, even in the present, that you're always planning your future by what you're doing in the present, and how you're planning and how you're being in the present.
Yeah, and the trigger word is, of course, manifestation.
Yes.
It's again, tomato, tomato. We are creating our reality, whether it be instantaneous or the next incarnation. What I had referred to earlier about the Arcanum and William Henry's work, it's 5,000 plus years of cross-cultural art and recording of what they had learned in their teachings of spirit and culture was that you can attain your light body or your next evolution without death. And that is the difference between the 0 civilization and a level 1 and a level 2 and a level 3, is we can do that inner work and achieve that without dying and become an evolutionary aspect, broader aspect of self during this life. What do you guys think?
I'd just like to comment, I've taught Buddhism for 20 years, and yeah, the idea of making contracts where we're born, it's quite similar idea of karma in Buddhism. It's kind of like tomato and tomato. I'd say one distinction in Buddhism is that the Buddha taught that karma is a natural law. It's an automatic law. You don't have to be making a contract before you take rebirth. Okay, I'm going to marry this person. I'm going to have this emotional breakdown. But if you're at a higher, I think from the Buddhist, if you have a person who's a higher level of consciousness, they could certainly perhaps choose a rebirth, and they might have some idea of like, this is what's going to happen. So I think that, I don't use that language contract, but in Buddhism, it's a very similar idea. Karma is going to play itself out, but it's just a natural law like gravity. These things just happen. You don't have to plan it from a Buddhist view.
I woke up about 4 or 5 mornings ago in the middle of probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I said, instant karma keeps us from that state of hell we have known in the past, because you're dealing with it as you go instead of having it compile and hit you on the next lifetime, and you're completely oblivious to what you had done wrong. So that's part of our evolutionary state, that we have awoken to the fact that we are much deeper, more widely connected to all that is than this little here and now experience.
And Michael did flat out say, Michael Horn, there is no karma. And he talked about, religions have this idea of the soul. Well, in Buddhism, it's unique in the idea that you don't have a self, but again, it's like tomato and tomato, your constant state of change and flux. There's rebirth in various realms. But he did flat out say there is no karma, so I disagree with that part.
Yeah, I think it's just a term, because, and I don't think it's comes from the outside. I think we very much do this all to ourselves. Even if there is one self, we are currently individuated into trillions of sparks of that oneness. And that's all that matters right now. And that's all that will matter until we return to the oneness state. We are trying to figure out this individuation that we chose to experience.
Yeah.
Therefore, we are all aspects of the one experiencing itself. And so embrace that. And again, I would rather, instead of being a victim, I would rather say, you know what, I've been a little perverse, or I stole once, or I didn't have something happen to me. I created this. I did this. We go to theme parks because we like to ride all the rides. We go to spook houses because we like the thrill. So we didn't come here just to be complacent, ride the kiddie rides. We like all this, depending on the individual.
Yeah, I agree with that. God is a creator, and that's what we are. We are individuations of that thing, and we're creating. And that's exactly how I live my life. And if an event has happened that I don't like, I reflect on what part of me created that part. I never focus on being, I actually, part of the problem with the UFOlogy field is I find victimization, the whole field, it's a field of victimization of this kind of freak out about who's doing what to us. Mm-hmm. And I don't live like this. I don't connect with it, and I don't live like that. And I focus fully on creator mentality that my thoughts are creating, my being state is creating. And I can always link back events in my life to what I was thinking and feeling that created these events. The victimization is it's just the end of your ability to create. When you're thinking things are happening to you and you have no power over them, you've lost all your power when you actually take that on.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is the definition of giving our power away.
It is, yeah.
Is saying we are victims and not wanting to accept responsibility for what we experience. And it's difficult because some of us have been pretty freaky.
Well, and then there's another part, which is the karma part, which is right. The karma word is a really weird word. It's an original word, karma, it's Sanskrit, and it means just action. And it's really about, the projected energy coming out of the mind and tendencies, and the reality that you might repeat things because your brain is in a tendency state. So you're projecting any energy outwards, and you're going to repeat behaviors. You're going to repeat things in your life.
Like a flag to the cause and effect.
Not only that about karma, not only that, I think that in the Western world, we totally changed the meaning of all that, because from what I had been shown, that's experience simply, it's most of all things we did not understand really, we didn't do properly because we misunderstood what had to be done, and so I'm just trying to correct things, to do it properly, exactly like when at school we were not good at all in mathematics and we have to take the course again. It's simply that. It's not a punishment, it's not a victory, it's nothing like that. It's just to learn.
Cause and effect.
To know better from next time. Oh, next time I will not make the same mistake. And that's simply that.
You know, that's awesome. That's awesome, Reed. So in this whole field from my contact events, I'm now really interested in life after death and the studies behind like life after death and out of body experiences. And there's a really interesting fact of a research I found for the people who study life after study reincarnation. So there's actually a scientific study when they have children who can accurately label information they don't have. They can label the person that they were and the location that they lived in and stuff the child doesn't know, right? And there's scientists who study this stuff, and they've now come up with bodies of evidence around it. And some of them are really fascinating, like if the person was shot in the stomach and died that way, the body that reincarnates will have like a stomach problems. Or if their hand was cut off, they'll have like a deformed hand. So it's a really fascinating, and that's just cause and effect. When you really think about that, that's not, and I think maybe our minds do the same thing. We build these tendencies in one life. And if you don't know how to overcome those tendencies, you just simply recreate your tendencies. You simply kind of move forward and recreate things.
Hey, Jeff, could I comment on that? Referring to the best scientific work is by Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia. He wrote about 4 or 5 feet thick of books, thousands of cases. My very first YouTube video in November of 2008 was about this. I taught like 50 lectures on karma river, just teaching professionally. And those very examples. And people can look up Dr. Ian Stevenson, exactly what you're saying.
Awesome.
They have lots of scientific evidence, like 3,000 cases of little kids who recall the previous lives, identify people from the previous lives, their relationships, people live down the block. It's very convincing evidence.
Yeah, there's a documentary on it called The Ghost in My Child, and it's all children being like they could do a paper trail of past events of how they were killed and where they were buried, etc. Ghost or the Ghost in My Child.
That's so cool.
It's like their memory didn't get erased before they came here.
Yeah, we were all somewhere.
Yeah.
Like we think we weren't somewhere before we were here.
Yeah, we're all energy bodies. Yeah.
That's my own experience.
Yeah. There's actually a really good documentary on Netflix too called Surviving Death. So it's a series, and it has this as well too, and it goes into other life after death experiences. It's really fascinating. So
there's a show I just watched called The Intruders, and they were a society that had been around for thousands of years, who the beginning of their doctrine says, in the beginning there was death, and afterward is eternal life. You just know how to navigate it. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Greer, you also mentioned something that I wanted to comment on,
cool.
Kind of like about ascension and stuff, and kind of what you found out about the light bodies. So I was shown on an alien spacecraft the death of my last life, then going into the afterlife and kind of the realm of this space, and they were basically showing me the Greys have the ability to kind of go into that realm. But importantly, after many years, they explained to me that what's kind of about to happen is that afterlife self is going to be more accessible. The veil that keeps the afterlife self from the human now will kind of be more transparent. Yeah. And we make and that's how they kind of just framed it to me, that we'll be able to make conscious choices about
Right, like you'll
reincarnating.
remember past lives.
Yeah, you'll remember,
you'll
you'll
be
be
able to do that.
consciously building your body, consciously making your lives, like how all they do, right? They move their energies from other bodies to other bodies, or they can do
Mhm.
things with their energies. And
Simultaneous existence.
yeah, and so we will be able to. And anyway, I was shown that I had a past life like 10,000 or something years ago, and I was doing that. And it all kind of came together that this is the natural state, and the state we're in now is the kind of denser state. And I don't know if this is magnetic field related or what this is all about, but the beings are all involving themselves on the planet because the state that we're going to go into will change our biology. And as we're moving into it, it's valuable to all the beings. So all the aliens love the genetics, and they do things with those genetics, and they build other bodies with those genetics. And then once that change happens, that interest won't be there anymore. And then it will just be this planet that's just different. And the beings on here will be everything will be all so crazy different. But yeah, so I was seeing things like that and shown things like that and told things like that in my own way. So I totally confirm.
Look up William Henry Arcanum. His research and cross-referencing is incredible.
Sure, I'll check
he's
that out.
dedicated his life. I put it in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
William Henry
Nice.
Arcanum. And lots and lots of cross-referenced information since the 80s that he put together in this documentary or the series.
I also want to point out for newbies, on our Vancouver UFO channel, we got about 25 hours of presentations by Jeff, PowerPoint, and several hours by Mimi as well. So if you really want to know Jeff's story, it's highly organized. It's all at Vancouver UFO at no
Cool.
cost.
Cool. Very cool.
Awesome.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, little plug.
Hey, Gert, you should speak up sometime too, as well too.
Yeah.
You
Sure.
have your experiences. Yeah, you can. They have spaces here for presentations.
Yeah, I was
so.
going to say, we should get your contact information, Greer. You could put your email in the chat or something.
Absolutely.
You're in Portland, Oregon. Now, how did you find us? That's a good question.
Meetup. But well, actually, that's not true. I researched MUFON first and then Meetup, and it just kind of coincided. But something that we've all touched base on a little bit here and there, or at least Jeff did, and someone else, is the fear that was throughout the UFO community. Like there's a separation between science and spirit that is bizarre to me, because I think they fundamentally support one another, that together there's a whole picture and separately they're void of a complete picture. And then the soul contracts, or the fact that we existed prior to being here, and that it's the victim mentality or the fear base of, oh, I was abducted and they probed me and all this. We don't know that we didn't agree to that.
Yeah.
You know? And it's interesting that only a couple of us, like Billy Meyer, have absolute recollection. And I know there's a couple stories here, like the fire in the sky and whatnot. I don't remember the guy's name, but he's supposedly remembers the horror that he went through on there, but they put him back.
Travis only remembers
Walton.
90
Travis
minutes
Walton.
out of 5 days. He remembers only 90
It's
minutes.
still fraction yet.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it sounds like a horrific part to remember. But who's to say he wasn't, a captain on that ship and was like, all right, shoot me into one of those meat suits. I gotta help these people, snap out of their limitation, and I'm gonna help us with some genetics and whatnot. And he said, go ahead, take samples, just put me back to where you picked me up. I just can't help but think it's more benevolent than it is. I'm quite aware that there are some turds out there, but it's just like humanity. Most of us are pretty cool. So I have to say the same thing about
Thank you,
the
Greer. You're so kind. Thank you.
I think the benevolence outweighs the people that are only here to be service of self. And I mean that in the most extreme way. There's topics that I will not talk about that have been floating the airwaves about the powers or those families that were tapped into, like Freemasons or Illuminati. You know, one scope is they were being burnt at the stake and they got ran off, and they had to create mystery schools because we were tapping into knowledge that we were not supposed to remember, because the families that were in charge were like, if they remember that, they will not do death and taxes and religion and need mediators and middlemen between them and their creator. They will not know who all that, they will remember who they are, and they won't need us, and then we can't be in power. So some perspective is they were naughty. Some are they were trying to keep truth and keep from being burnt at the stake. And then segments of those people took that as an opportunity to branch off and become the Bilderberger, the cabal, the whatnot. And now society is kind of waking up to the fact that, hey, these dudes were saying one thing and it's actually not that. It's all this. And so they're losing their power through frequency and support. Like Russia just stepped away from the monopoly of the Rothschild and the banking and the Bilderbergers. They've paid off all their debts, and now they're a completely independent country from that captivity. So
I
like,
doubt it.
wow.
I doubt it though. 100% Rothschild controlled banking system. Is that this week? Like that's astonishing. That was
The only way they could get out of it is not to use banks, right? That would be the only
look it
way.
up.
I just don't think that's the case. Yeah.
But okay, so I'm going to say that the potential is there that we can release ourselves from the restraints that were created in the matrix or whatever, hologram, whatever you want to call it, in our environment for the last 100 or 200 years, or even 1,000 years, or since they called our star brother Jesus and declared Christianity. I mean, so much crap happened after Constantine came into power, and we are waking up to the fact that there's way more going on, and we're way more empowered and in touch and connected than all these weird limitations that were set forth for us. That's what I refer to as the awakening to the ascension, is remembering our connection to all that is and not believing this horseshit about taxes and religion and politics.
Well, Greer, I just want to ask you your view. Do you think we're getting genetically hybrid through the abduction program, that over the future centuries or whenever there will be a future hybrid version of humanity with powers, telepathy, and it'll be a much more wholesome, happier society? Is that your view of the future?
I 100% believe that we are hybridly creating what we would now refer to as super beings, but it's just awakening our DNA that was there in the first place. We're just coming back online into the credibleness that we were to be in the first place. So yes.
Okay, so you think we'll be humanity will be hybrids in the future, in your view?
I mean, we already are hybrids.
But better hybrids, better than we are now.
We are very much hybrids already.
Yeah, but we're not doing a very good job, right? 7.8 billion people with their wars right now. We need to be improved, in your view, correct?
I don't think we need to do anything other than it is just time collectively. Our conscious, our collective is just ready for the next freaking show. We played this out. We chose to experience it. If I say we're doing it wrong, then I'm claiming victimhood, and I'm not. We deliberately created this, and it has played itself out, and we're just on to the next game, on to the next level.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So you're one of the people that probably thinks that we did ascend in 2012.
No, I don't think
No?
that at all. I was in the middle of
the
moving.
reality, well, the two paths, the bad wolf and the good wolf, right? That we already chose the timeline in 2012, that we were going to go into a positive rather than end of the world scenario.
I never thought it was
people
the end of
believe
the
that.
world scenario. I did dabble in that, but I mean, I was packing up and moving to Texas from New Mexico the last week of December. So if I was all that, I wouldn't have went through the trouble. I do think there was definitely a point, because there have been several Keppas of humanity on here that have been obliterated, and whoever was not saved, but like the Hopis say the insectoids took them inner earth and the Maya disappeared overnight. There were societies like in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, they have that huge underground city. They're all around the world. So
And
yes,
people took refuge during dangerous
the
times.
people who were aware took refuge and left. Some people, you know, left them hanging out to dry because they were basically like wiping the you know what off their shoes and trying to collectively do this. I think in 2012, instead of having that huge ice age, or for the fire from the sky, or the meteor, or the dinosaur, you know, instead of having that, we had evolved enough and brought our frequency up enough to give the world a global shot at evolution, instead of only a few of us that we had done for millions of years in the past.
Sort of to
But it's
power
also
start
very-
the age of Aquarius, kind of.
And who knows how long that starting process is. It's not like January 1st, it all changed. There's a starting process, and time is very different everywhere else than it is here.
Well, that's one thing that I've noticed, is that time has changed. Time is really, really different now than it used to be. It's compressed in some ways, and then you can stretch it out longer. if you
I
want,
agree.
in other ways.
I agree. Certain things that
Things are
instead of
going
things
fast.
that I love speeding by, those are the times that have slowed down and compressed into where I can really relish painting or creating art or hanging with my dog. And the shit show that I don't want to is what is zipping by now. And it used to be the other way around.
Mm. Well, that's nice.
One point that I consider very important for the now is not to be totally sure of anything, because it seems that right now the best and the worst are all mixed up in the same places. So it's very difficult right now to say this is good, this is bad, because in the same stuff you can have the best and the worst. And we have right now to be very careful discerning things, looking at small things, making the difference. You understand what I mean? It's all mixed up.
Yeah,
And,
it's definitely like a yin yang. It's a yin
Exactly,
yang
but
that's
mixed
really
up.
moving,
It's
right?
not this is good, this is bad.
Yes.
Things are really mixed up. It's because it's really a war, in fact, in these energies. And it's very important to just stand at what we feel the best, but not judge too quickly about groups, about anything. It's mixed up.
Yeah,
Because
I
the
think
best things have been invaded by the worst things too. And the opposite is true, which is the good news. So don't be too judgmental.
that's
but
what I
look
was
very
talking about
seriously.
earlier with the multiple aspects, the multiverse, that we created Earth to be an environment for conflicting truths to be true simultaneously. If we came here to coexist, those truths all needed to exist for us to open ourselves and expand ourselves into another way of believing, experiencing, and being.
Like duality serving evolution.
Sure.
Oh, it totally does. I think that the shift is a higher high and a lesser low, though. That's the evolutionary process in its simplest form. And the stuff that wants to stay down here is being removed from our experience, just like in the past when we had the ice age and the flood and the meteors that wiped existence out, and only those societies that were in the know went inner earth, and they were spared from having to recycle and start over from scratch, and they got to start or continue their evolutionary process. I think that's very much what is happening right now with the powers that have been into the actual bigger picture, we're weeding out the muck that we no longer care for in our experience. We don't want to experience it anymore, and we will literally ignore it out of our reality.
Yes, but we are going through exactly the same processes as we did already 4 times.
Yes, but I'm hoping that the whole 2012 situation was the decision or the fork in the road where we had evolved enough that we don't have to do that.
It's a personal decision. It's a personal decision.
Oh, all of it is. Yes. That's why it makes me twitch when people say, this is how it is. Well, that's how it is for you.
Yes,
it's all possible, and it can be very different for you than it is for me. And it doesn't mean one is right or wrong. I can't stand the limitation argument. But if someone is limited in their beliefs, then that is their reality.
You were speaking, for instance, about the fact we are all hybrids, and I am quite sure, I quite agree with that. And nowadays, what occurs with the new vibrations and all is that we are developing, opening things, doors, which were still closed inside us. So we are developing lots of stuff.